Hello, good morning and welcome to Sky News Breakfast. A 31-year-old man will appear at Nottingham Magistrates Court today, charged with 3 counts of murder. Students Grace O'Malley-Kumar and Barnaby Webber and school caretaker Ian Coates were stabbed on Tuesday morning, while the suspect, Valdo Kalkani, is also accused of using a van to drive at pedestrians. Now, police say the charges are a big development and will continue to provide support and reassurance to all of those affected. Our Midlands correspondent Lisa Dowd reports.
This family clearly find comfort in being in this city. This is the exact spot in Nottingham where their 19-year-old son, Barnaby Webber, lost his life. As police held traffic back, they laid flowers on the road where he died. 31-year-old Valdo Kalkani, of no fixed address, is charged with the murders of Barnaby, fellow student Grace O'Malley-Kumar and school caretaker Ian Coates. They were stabbed to death on Tuesday. Kalkani also studied in this city. He left the University of Nottingham last summer after graduating from a course in mechanical engineering. Kalkani's family vicar in West Wales said his thoughts were with the victims.
It was overwhelming to think that lives have just been cut down like that, so horrifically. And so our hearts went out to the victims and we were praying for them.
The 3 victims, who all loved sport, were remembered on day 1 of the Ashes. The biggest day in cricket started with a moment's silence. And to commemorate Barnaby and Grace, both talented cricketers, during the 56th over, the number on Barnaby's cricket shirt, Amazing Grace, was played from the stands. In Nottingham's Market Square, the mass of flowers just grows.
Innocent people, I just think it's so cruel and so harsh.
I don't even know what to say, really. Yeah, but I thought I should come and also be part of the community mourning.
Also on people's minds here are the 3 others who were run over during these attacks. 2 are in a stable condition and 1 has been discharged from hospital. Kalkani is also charged with their attempted murders. This week has ended 3 lives and changed countless others here. It is the week this city will never forget. Lisa Dowd, Sky News, Nottingham.
Fashion editor Dame Anna Wintour, TV presenter Davina McCall and football legend Ian Wright are just a few of the famous faces being recognised in King Charles's first birthday honours list. Now, alongside them, community heroes, fundraisers and campaigners are also on the list. Our royal correspondent Laura Bondock has been to meet some of those being honoured.
Who gets gongs? After the blasting of Boris Johnson's resignation honours, perhaps here a less contentious lineup.
That's lovely, fantastic.
Recognised and rewarded in the King's first birthday honours. Suzanne Richards, now MBE. She lost her son Joel, her brother and her father in the 2015 Tunisian terror attack, and she set up a charity to help others bereaved by murder or terrorism.
Never in a world of Sundays did I ever think I'd get anything like this, but it is bittersweet. You know, there's a reason why I've received this.
Suzanne is already poised to help the families of last week's Nottingham killings.
Just knowing what what those families are going through, and it's just horrific. There's such a mirror image of what happened. They were 19, Joel was 19, student university, so was Joel. So yeah, but we will be here to support them.
At 18, Junior Frood is the youngest on the list, awarded a British Empire Medal. The young dancer making moves to beat bullying with his hashtag #BoysCanDance.
It means so much. It just shows all the hard work that I do is being noticed and my voice is being heard and people are hearing me, and it just feels so crazy that I'm the youngest. It's so crazy, and I'm so honoured to receive this award.
Also on the list, Dame Anna Wintour, the Vogue editor-in-chief, awarded a Companion of Honour. as are the author Sir Ian McEwan and Professor Sir John Bell, who played a prominent role in the pandemic. There are MBEs for Davina McCall and the actor Vicky McClure, who's campaigned about dementia. This year's list, a continuation of the coronation theme of helping out and service.
The King doesn't choose who gets honoured, but it is part of his first official birthday celebrations, including his first trooping the colour as King. He will make his way up the Mall on horseback, the first time a monarch's done that since 1986.
And for that, the flags are out and the route ready, with thousands expected for another royal spectacle. Laura Bundock, Sky News.
And we'll have more from Laura next hour because she'll join us from Buckingham Palace ahead of the King's first trooping of the colour parade as monarch. Well, let's take a look at some other stories making news for you this morning. And a truck driver has been convicted of fatally shooting 11 worshippers at a synagogue in Pittsburgh in 2018. Robert Bowers pleaded not guilty to all 63 charges against him. Now the trial moves to the sentencing stage where he could face death or life in prison without parole. The whistleblower who leaked the classified Pentagon papers in 1971 has died at the age of 92. Daniel Ellsberg helped to expose the US government's deception of the public about the extent of its involvement during the Vietnam War. Now, at least 5 people have been killed after severe storms and tornadoes hit the southern states of America. Hundreds of thousands of people have also been left without electricity after severe weather warnings were put in place. Now, 2 men have been arrested in Leicestershire after the discovery of around £120 million worth of cocaine, which were hidden in sacks of charcoal. The National Crime Agency says the haul was found on a ship that arrived into London Gateway Port from Panama. That was last week. 2 men have been arrested on suspicion of importing Class A drugs. Now, annual mortgage repayments are set to rise by almost £3,000 for the average household remortgaging next year. That's according to research from the Resolution Foundation think tank. It's a good time now to check in with our political correspondent, Rob Powell. Behind the headline, Rob, what is this all about? I'm like 2 years off of remortgaging. I'm worried. Should people at home be worried?
Well, I think if you're reading this report and you are hoping to buy a home or you're remortgaging, then I think it would make for quite grim reading. Essentially, what it shows is that the average household remortgaging next year will pay £2,900 per year more in their repayments compared to what they're on already. It also makes some forecasts about where mortgage interest rates are going to go in the years ahead, and says that they won't fall below 4.5% until the end of 2027. So we'll be staying quite high for a few years yet. The current average is almost 6%. That compares to just over 3% a year ago. Now, of course, this is happening because the Bank of England base rate has been increasing for the past 18 months from close to 0 to 4.5%, and it may go even higher when the bank meets again on Thursday. That is an attempt to combat inflation, rising prices, but also there are broader interest rate rises that are going on around the globe. I think politically it poses a problem for Rishi Sunak because inflation is taking longer to come down than expected, which means interest rates may stay higher for longer than expected. And I think if people are going into the next election having just remortgaged and having had to pay a lot more in interest, that clearly does not bode well for the government. Polling shows a lot of people place the blame for that at the government's door.
OK, for now, Rob, thank you very much. OK, let's take a look at the front pages for you this morning. Lots going on. And as we've been reporting, the iWeekend claims that high street banks are making billions during the cost of living crisis by increasing mortgages without passing on interest rates to savers. Well, The Guardian also looks into an expected surge in mortgages, which they say make the Tories a time bomb. Same story in the Financial Times there. Well, the front page of The Telegraph features the former Bank of England boss, that's Mark Carney. He's blamed stubbornly high inflation on, guess what, Brexit. Now, Boris, it's a farce, don't back me, reads the front page of The Express as it reports the former Prime Minister has urged his supporters to move on and not expose those deranged Commons sanctions. Mr Johnson again on the front page of The Times with news his notebooks have been withheld from him by the government since they hold highly sensitive information. Well, the Mirror leads with the King's first birthday honours list and says, unlike Boris Johnson's, these are truly deserved. And the Sun claims Prince Harry's court case could cost the taxpayer more than £1 million. And the Daily Mail, well, that's reporting that the first hosepipe ban of the year has been slapped on those living in Kent and Sussex. Now, Sky News has visited the scene of what Ukraine says was one of the worst war crimes carried out by Russia in the early months of the war. Now, the northern village of Yehidny has around 400 residents, and in February last year, nearly all of them were held underground in a school basement for a month where they were starved and tortured. 10 of them didn't survive the ordeal, and many of the villagers are now due to testify against 15 Russian soldiers. Our special correspondent Alex Crawford has this exclusive report from Yehidny.
From the bombed-out ruins of their community club, the survivors of one of the most horrifying acts in this war sing in lusty defiance. The villagers of Yehidny are about to be the star witnesses in Ukraine's biggest war crimes trial to date. They fall silent. They're honouring those who didn't make it through the largest single kidnapping carried out by Russian troops during their invasion of the country. The memories of what they've all been through are still searingly raw. In the basement of the village school, Russian soldiers held hostage almost the entire community. Ivan was amongst nearly 400 villagers held captive underground here for nearly a month. The picture taken on their release shows one of the bigger cells, packed full of hostages. They were crammed in like this all the time, starved, terrified and tortured. 368 villagers in all, 69 of them children. They were split up amongst a network of different-sized cells with no hygiene, little air and just buckets to go to the toilet in, with all the rooms horribly overcrowded.
They put numbers on the outside of the room. There were 19 in here. And look at the size of this cell. No windows. And out of the 19, 9 of them were children. There was no room to lie down or sleep properly.
No war, the words say. The children drew themselves with unhappy faces amongst hopeful hearts and Ukrainian flags. And there are others showing executions that they feared or witnessed. Few thought they'd get out alive.
It was really scary for the children and grandchildren. It was like a nightmare. I don't know how we got through it.
Russian soldiers set up camp inside the village's only school days after the invasion began. The big sandy scars on the school grounds are where they dug in their military vehicles. Schools, like hospitals, are protected under international law, and hiding inside to launch attacks is considered a war crime. We've been given rare access to what the Ukrainian prosecutors found. Whole military files, a soldier's backpack, phones and SIM cards, as well as commander's orders. They've identified 15 Russian soldiers that they believe violated the international rules of war when they carried out the siege in Yehidny school.
We're trying to prove that this large number of people, more than 360, were kept in the basement of the school and used by the Russian troops as human shields against the Ukrainian forces.
And they're confident they have the physical evidence left behind by the soldiers. There are also hundreds of witnesses who'll testify about the brutal conditions which led to at least 10 of the hostages dying, with their bodies left there, sometimes for days. Some of the children kept underground in the dark amongst the corpses were babies or toddlers. Others, like Marina and Lilia, were young teenagers when they were held captive. We went down there as children, Marina says, and we left as adults with a very different view about everything. Ukrainian forensic investigators showed us the new technological devices which they're hoping will seal a guilty verdict in the courts. They've taken thousands of images, using for the first time in the country a range of 3D scanners to document what happened inside. It's an incredible technological weapon which freezes the crime scene forever, so forensic analysts, lawyers and police can minutely examine and zoom in on every part of the investigation site.
The whole village was a hostage.
It'll also be used by the International Criminal Court to prosecute those responsible. I want to hear the first verdicts this year, Natalia tells us. That's what I want, and it's the wish of millions of Ukrainians too. There's much unresolved anguish over just what happened in Yehidny, and a lot of hope being pinned on the upcoming war crimes trial to avenge everything they went through and those who perished. Alex Crawford, Sky News in Yehidny in northern Ukraine.
Alexander Matvichuk is a human rights lawyer and joins me now from Kyiv. Morning to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on Sky News. You would have heard our special report there from Alex Crawford in the northern village of Yehidny. What are your thoughts on those people today?
This is a very cruel crime against humanity because these people not just was taken as a human shield, but subjected to torture and ill treatment. And I spoke with survivors from this village, and they told me that they have no idea whether or not they will be alive next morning, because when they were in the basement of the school, they don't understand what time is it, what day is it, they lack of oxygen, they lack of hope. And this is very unhuman experiment, which was dictated only by hate to Ukrainians.
And in particular, from that report by Alex, was a description there about how children, in particular, were writing on the walls saying, "No more war." When you've spoken to those children, how do they seem? How do you go about repairing such trauma?
I myself don't gather testimonies from children because it needs to be done very carefully not to provide additional traumatization. I work with adults. And beside this children drawing on the wall, the adults make a calendar. They try to understand what day it is. And also they write on the wall the names of people who were dead in this captivity.
It's unthinkable, isn't it? And when you look forward about documenting war crimes, how confident are you about being able to bring crimes by Russia and alleged crimes by Russia to court? Are you confident?
When large-scale invasion started, we united our efforts with regional organizations, dozens of regional organizations. Now in our database, we have 41,000 episodes of war crimes, and Yehidny is only one episode. So we face with unprecedented amount of war crimes. And I'm confident that sooner or later, all Russians who committed these crimes by their own hands, as well as Putin and top political leadership and high military command, will be brought to justice. But we need international assistance to be able to effectively investigate and prosecute each criminal episode which was committed in the smallest village in Ukraine.
And Alexander, very lastly, what does victory for Ukraine look like for you as a human rights lawyer?
Victory for Ukraine is not just to repel Russian troops out and release people who live in Crimea, in Luhansk, in Donetsk, in other parts of Ukrainian territories which are under Russian occupation. Victory of Ukraine is also meant to succeed in democratic transitions and to build the country where the rights of everybody are protected.
OK, that's Alexander Matvichuk. Thank you very much for your time on Sky News today. Hello, good morning. You're watching Sky News Breakfast. Our top stories for you this morning. And a 31-year-old man will appear in front of magistrates' courts today, charged with the murders of 3 people in Nottingham. Well, top honours for fashion editor Dame Anna Wintour, football legend Ian Wright and presenter Davina McCall in the King's first birthday list. And new research suggests mortgage repayments could rise by almost £3,000 a year for the average household. Now, the weather is so hot and dry, they're celebrating rain in Glasgow. Anyway, environmental watchdogs are warning that every part of Scotland now finds itself within a shortage of water, and last night's thunderstorms won't be enough to replenish parched streams and rivers. And the situation is so serious that one distillery is warning that it may have to stop making whisky. I'm joined now by Andrew Symington. He's managing director of Signatory Vintage Scotch Whisky, and he joins me now from beautiful Perthshire. Morning to you. Look, talk me through conditions. What are they like for you? And are you worried about business?
Yeah, it's very, very hot. We had 27 degrees here yesterday, and it's been an unprecedented almost 6-week spell with no rain at all. In my 21 years here, I've never experienced anything like it. And as it gets hotter and hotter, our burn is drying up. Basically, the water's evaporating. As the stones and bedrock get hot, it's impossible to use that water to cool our stills.
Oh, Andrew, I'm just seeing the pictures now. It looks quite desperate, doesn't it? What are you and your team doing this morning even to source water? And tell us why it's so important for whisky making.
We use water for two things. One, to actually make the whisky. Sorry about that alarm going off there. That's a low water alarm.
You're OK, my man.
Of all things, so we use it to make the actual whiskey, and we use it to cool our stills. We have what we call worm tanks, which are copper worms, copper coils, which the vapors go down and water flows through that, cooling them, which condenses that vapor into the spirit. It's an old-fashioned way of doing it, but we like to keep the old tradition alive here. So in the future, we're probably going to have to look at other ways of doing it, like putting in a closed-loop cooling circle and a cooling tower at an expense of maybe around £400,000 in order to keep this tradition going.
Well, and it's great, isn't it, to keep that tradition growing?
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, we like to think they were still making whiskey as they did 200 years ago.
Oh, gosh, you'll have to keep someone nice for me next time I'm in Perthshire. But do talk to me about how much rain you think will be needed to turn things around.
Well, I just watched the weather forecast and I saw that there's heavy rain due on Monday morning for about 5 hours. But it's no good if it actually rains here, because that rain's gone by us. It's of no use to us. It has to rain about 15, 20 miles up in the moor on the hills here. And it has to be penetrated rain. Thunderstorms don't do anything.
Yes.
So
what you're saying, you need, Andrew, you need drizzly rain. Is that correct?
Yeah, consistently, 3 or 4 weeks of consistent slow rain. When we took over here in 2001, we on the 6th of August, we had a massive thunderstorm, and the water raged through here and caused about £500,000 worth of damage 10 days after I bought the place. So we are now sitting with bated breath when we hear about thunderstorms. The history is not going to repeat itself 21 years on.
Oh dear. So if production is slowed or halted, what does that mean for business?
Well, it means we have less whiskey to sell in 10 years' time. It's not impacting what we sell today. Whiskey is a long-term thing. It goes into the cask and it sleeps for nearly 10 years.
But for customers, what does it mean? Does it mean an increase in price, potentially?
Potentially, yes. If there's a short 10 years' time, yes, prices will go up if there's not as much whiskey. We basically dropped from 3 shifts a day down to 2. So we're on 2/3 of what we would normally produce at present. And that may well drop to 1/3 next week.
OK. Andrew, thank you so much for your time. And I hope for changing the weather for you and the team sometime soon.
As we say in Scotland, today's rain is tomorrow's whiskey.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Bye-bye.
Well, the other story we're talking about today is the King's first birthdays honours list. Well, it's been revealed, and we're hearing that stars like Ian Wright and Anna Wintour are being honoured, but local heroes and campaigners have been recognised too. And lucky to say, one of those to make the list is former lifeboat operations manager at the RNLI, and that's Michael Buckland. Michael, a very good morning to you. Tell me, how are you feeling?
Good morning to you, Leah. I'm completely blown away, if I'm honest. I don't know how much people know, but I was notified, I guess everybody else was, about a month ago. And I'll be really honest that the letter came through and I opened it up and it's on the envelope, it says on His Majesty's service, which, you kind of wonder what on earth is inside. And I read the letter and I reread the letter and I read the letter again. And I just kept thinking, this is a wind up or this is a scam, because you're asked to sort of fill out some details and send them back. And I'm thinking, this can't be true. This can't, there's got to be a catch here somewhere. I mean, what we hear, you guys report on scams all the time, don't you? So that's all I could think it was. And eventually I sort of read it, I guess I calmed down and read it in a bit more detail. And realised it was in connection with the RNLI. And the more I sort of read into it, the more I thought, yeah, okay, this does sound genuine, because I have been with the RNLI for 20-odd years. But still blown away. I mean, it's a complete shock.
And there's a lovely photo of you, Michael, on screen right now.
Oh, the handsome devil.
You look great. I mean, and as you just said there, you've spent hours and hours on the water, rescuing people. Do tell me, how do honours like this make that job all the more worthwhile?
Oh, I mean, we don't do this kind of thing for honours. I got stuck in because I guess it was a bit of a boyhood fantasy. I lived in Weston-super-Mare years ago and still do now. And the fact I'm in Falmouth now is because I'm away for the weekend. But, I remember looking across to where the old lifeboat station was, with the big red doors and the slipway, which, I guess is quite a traditional scene. And I remember sort of looking across as a young boy and being quite fascinated with all of that and what it involved. And then I remember going there as a Cub Scout, and being shown around and being the cub that was pulled out of the group and stood in the boat and dressed up in all the gear. And so it clearly had a boyhood fascination for me. And then after I'd been to university and I'd got my first job and I guess life had settled a bit into adult life, I thought maybe now's the time. So I joined up and I think things took off from there. I joined the boat crew, became fully trained boat crew, then became a helmsman, which means you're the person that takes the boat to sea and drives and is in charge of the boat. And you just I just had a ball. I had an absolute ball. You're doing things, you're working with people who you get on with, you have a great time. Yes, there's some humdrum stuff to do with the training, but generally the training's fun. You're working with people, you have different challenges all the time. It's like everybody else. You have a hobby, whether you play sport or you
Michael,
do arts and crafts.
You do forget, don't you? You do. Lots of people forget that these lifeboats, they're actually staffed by volunteers.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, the vast majority of people that go on lifeboats around the coast of Britain are volunteers. Everything's done, in our own time. But it's a hobby. It's something that's great fun. But equally, you have to have very supportive family behind you. I can't stress that enough because, when I'm carrying a pager, and particularly when my kids were young, you imagine being in a shoe shop, doing the summer holiday shoe shop with two young kids that don't want to be there, and your pager goes off, which mine did, and it wasn't set up by friends. It was genuine, and I abandoned my wife and my kids in the high street. And I took the car because I had to get to the lifeboat station. And, my wife just had to work out how on earth she was going to get home with two young kids and a buggy and everything else. And, without their support throughout those years, I couldn't have done what I've done. You're leaving them constantly in all sorts of situations.
And what do the kids, briefly, what do they think? Daddy's a hero, right?
I don't think so. I think Dad's always done that. I've been doing it since before the kids. So they've always known me as, just Dad that goes to the boathouse on a Wednesday night for training or a Sunday morning for training and then disappears at other opportunities to get involved in rescues. And, it's just always what I've done. So it's just, I don't know. I don't know whether they think I'm a hero or not, really. You'd have to ask them.
I bet they do. Michael Buckland, MBE, congratulations.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Well, it's time to look at the papers, and with us to review them is the former editor of the Daily Star. It's Dawn Neeson. Great to have you in the studio, Dawn.
It's brilliant. It's so exciting.
And UK editor of The Big Issue, that's Paul McNamee. Paul, morning to you. So, let's delve in now. Paul, you've picked out a Times article, and this is all about how the cost of living crisis is basically making people who have retired, getting them back into the job for taking up jobs because they can't afford, I suppose, the cost of living, essentially.
Yes. When we look at cost of living, how it impacts people, frequently the impact on younger people, young families, is highlighted. They're right at the sharp end of it. But this report that the Times is talking about from Age UK looks at the other end of the people who have either retired or are about to retire. And because, as you've said, because of the cost of living, particularly it seems around heating bills last winter, are having to go back into the labour market. And some of the numbers should bear it up. 9 months ago, there were 1.196 million people under 65 who'd retired. Now that number is down to 1.075 million. So about 100,000 people who it looks like have potentially gone back into the labour market because they've got no other means of sustaining themselves. Cost of living's gone higher. Pensions are not meeting the demands that inflation are placing on households, so people are having to go back. And I suppose you could, there's two sides to this. On the one, this is very difficult for people who have worked their entire life, we're looking forward to some kind of retirement, and perhaps have challenges with health that come when you're older. So it means that they're not able to necessarily go back in full time. But on the other hand, I suppose you could say that there are positive impacts of work, both for your mental health, for social reasons, and for a number of other things. But if you are somebody who's a carer, for instance, this just puts more demands on you. And I suppose it stops the idea of a positive retirement.
Yeah, that's it. And the charity quoting a person saying the only time the family put on the heating was last winter at Christmas. And thinking about that early part of the year, it was freezing, wasn't it? Yeah, that's a tough one for many people who wanted to enjoy retirement. So, Dawn, let's talk about your story. This is inside the Telegraph. And this is a COVID unit.
Well, this is...
Recording MPs.
I found this utterly shocking, Leah. This is about a Labour MP called Belle Ribeiro Abbey, and she submitted a subject access request to the counter disinformation unit. They were set up. They're set up before COVID to monitor domestic and foreign threats to, security in this country. But they also ended up monitoring what people were saying about COVID. Obviously the conspiracy theories and things like that, I accept. But this lady, she simply asked Matt Hancock, who was Health Secretary at the time, what the plans were for the COVID vaccination for people with learning disabilities. That was all she asked, which is, for disabled people, basically, how are we going to look after them? Simple point that you would have thought needed answering. And for that, she's discovered that she was monitored. Now, the government deny this was the case, but she was monitored. Her interests were monitored. The fact that she had interest in disabilities and cancer and care working, and her interests were monitored, and her social media were monitored, because she simply asked how disabled people were going to be cared for in the vaccine rollout.
Of course.
I find it actually quite terrifying, I must admit.
The government's saying, they haven't monitored anyone's activity or any individual, but we'll leave it at that.
Yes.
Paul, we all know the weather is a big story. We need sun cream, that's bottom line. But The Guardian, on page 9, are saying, talking about how dermatologists are saying that sunscreen should be free for the poorest in society, because it is pricey. You go into any kind of high street store, you're talking a minimum of £6-7.
That's right. I mean, this is interesting because the previous story I looked at was about income and climate and how that was impacting people's how they live. This is the other side of it. This is extreme heat rather than extreme cold. But you're right. According to according to this, and this comes from the British Association of Dermatologists and other people involved with care, it's around £6.50 a bottle on average for sun cream, particularly high factor. And the British Association of Dermatologists have said that this is a vital piece of the jigsaw fighting the rise in cancer, melanomas particularly. So they are calling for a suspension of VAT on sunscreen, and others have gone further, saying, well, look, we just need to provide it for those who are on lowest incomes free. There's been a push for this for a couple of years. Going back, there was a celebrity push last year asking for some way to make sure that people can get access to this for free when they need it. The Hygiene Bank, who are an organisation who work with a lot of food banks, have been collecting early part of this year to make sure that they can get sunscreen into food banks, so that people need it, they can go and get it. But obviously, it's not a perfect solution, and people are going to need it more. It is nice outside in the sun, but we do need to provide protection. And a big issue, in fact, we found that this is a problem for our vendors, because when they go out and they're trying to make a living by selling the magazine on the street, they need protection as well. So we have tried to get them as much sunscreen as we can. They're the people who buy from them have also provided, but it's a very real and a very live issue at present.
Okay. On the other side of this, Dawn, page 4 of The Sun, be keen to get your thoughts on the layout, on the headline here.
Yeah,
Law and Order.
It's
you approve?
Yeah, it's a fun tabloid headline, isn't it? It's what The Sun are put on earth to do, but it's not such a funny story. For 2 million people in this country, it's the Great British Summer, obviously. After the one of the wettest marches in England and Wales since 1981, we have the earliest summer hosepipe ban in this country for 11 years. I know. So this is our Kent and Sussex now are going to be hosepipe ban from June the 26th. That's 580,000 people. Already added to the million people in Cornwall and Devon.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because someone did tweet me and said, hang on a second, down in Cornwall, we've had one for some time now.
A whole year, Leah. They've been under one for a whole year. So, I mean, summer doesn't even officially start until next week, by the way. So it's quite astonishing. South East Water have instigated the latest ban, the Boss, who's only on £307,000 a year. And so basically, you know, how much of this is mismanagement by the water companies, who, by the way, made £2.8 billion in profits in 2021 alone? Leah, they've got one job: get clean water to us, take dirty water away. And they still can't manage it, can they? And that's why, you know, how many leaks are losing this water?
Yeah, potholes and leaks.
Exactly. So,
okay.
yes. So good luck, everyone out there, if you want to use your hose pipe.
OK. Lastly, briefly, Paul, how fast are you on the Rubik's Cube?
This story is remarkable. The only way I was ever able to do a Rubik's Cube was taking stickers off and place it back on.
Oh, you cheat.
That's cheating!
I know. That's how fast I am. Not very fast. But this guy, 21-year-old Max Park, 3.13 seconds.
Oh, wow.
3.13 seconds to do a Rubik's Cube.
Honestly, that is incredible. We'll leave it there for now, guys. Thank you so much